All right, cool. So today we are going to go through a free response question. We're going to do number 3 from the 2016 AP exam, so last year's exam provided by the College Board. Cool. So the question starts, a crossword puzzle grid is a two-dimensional rectangular array of black and white squares. Some of the white squares are labeled with a positive number according to the crossword labeling rule. So the crossword labeling rule identifies squares to be labeled with a positive number as follows. So it lists a couple rules here, and then the squares identified by these criteria are labeled with consecutive number, row, major order, starting at 1. And then this is the example they provide. Okay. So the first question asks us, oh, hold on, before we get into the questions, they give us the classes. So it uses 2 classes. So a square class, defined as you see here. Maybe I can get a little bigger. There you go. Class, which has a constructor that takes in a Boolean and an int, and a crossword class that has a square 2D array, a constructor that takes in a 2D array of Booleans, and then a method called toBeLabeled that returns a Boolean for each square. So, first question asks us, write the crossword method toBeLabeled. The method returns true if the square indexed by row R, column C in a crossword puzzle grid should be labeled with a positive number according to the crossword labeling rule. Returns false. The parameter black squares indicates which squares in the crossword puzzle grid are black. And then they give you some information here. So that was a lot. But let's try to draft this. So where would you start? That was like a lot of information. So where would you start with this problem?
Should we make a 2D array?
Okay, cool. So I'm actually going to create a new doc for us. So make a 2D array. Okay. And why do you say that? Let's go back up here.
Well, to hold the
So what are we given so far? We have,
we're given the number of rows and number of columns.
Yes, true. Mm-hmm.
And then we need to figure out if at a particular row and column position, if it's a black square or not.
Correct. So toBeLabeled. Can you see this okay? Is that better?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So we want toBeLabeled. We want this essentially, right?
Yes.
Nope, that didn't work. So we have private Boolean toBeLabeled, and toBeLabeled takes in what are these numbers representing?
It takes in basically the position that we're checking to see where a black square is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So we have int R, int C. So that's your row and column position, and then I believe a Boolean 2D array called black squares. Okay. And what is the goal of this method?
It needs to return a Boolean, well, true or false, based on whether or not that square is black.
Right. true or false based on whether the square RC, like that. Oops. Oh, sorry. Is black. Okay, cool. So how do we want to do this?
I'm trying to see if, okay, so the two classes that are used for this question says that there is a Boolean that answers whether or not the square is black, but they don't have a method that will check that Boolean. Already read.
So I think the black squares variable, or like that data structure, looks something like a grid of true, like a table of true and false values. So it looks something like this, like true, false, false. So this is what black squares looks like.
Okay.
It's a 2D array that looks like this. So what are the conditions for a square to be labeled, For a square to be labeled
as a black square, it should have true in its position.
Okay.
On or whatever.
Okay. So we want to label it. There were two conditions, right? It says here we want to label it if it's white, and if the square does not have any white square immediately above it, well, or it does not have one to its left, or both. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. So keeping that in mind, those are our requirements to be labeled. It has to be white. And then above, left, or both can't be white. So how would we check if the square is white? The square to begin with.
We need to call black squares RC.
Cool. Yeah, exactly. All right. So, so if we check black squares RC, and what do we need to do with this? We want to check if it's white, right?
Yes. So
yeah.
We can say we need to use a conditional.
Okay.
But I'm not sure what all we need to have in this conditional.
Okay, we can do one step at a time, NP.
Okay. Should we have an if statement?
Sure, let's try it out. So if black squares are C, what are we checking?
Are we allowed to check to see if this is equal to true?
Yeah, for sure. So we want to see if this is true. And actually, just by doing if black squares are C, like this, if this evaluates to true, what does that mean? Is it black or white?
It means it's black.
Yeah, exactly. So if it's black, what do we want to? Yeah.
Can we just return black squares RC?
Would we want to return true?
You're right. Well, yes. If we're checking to see if the square is black and it's returning true or false based on whether or not it is black, and black squares RC gives us true or false if the square is supposed to be black, can we just return black squares RC?
So if we do that, then we're saying that, so something like this, like if we return black squares RC, we will label every black square. Is that true? Is that correct, I should say?
No, it's not correct.
Remember, we only want to label the square if it's white and the square above, left, or both aren't white. But I like that idea of just returning one thing. So say that we want to return like one condition and the other condition, you know, and skip all of this logic. So the first thing is we want it to be white. And how would we check that?
So we need to check it. We can do not like exclamation mark black squares RC. So that would give us basically the white square, or whether or not it's white.
Perfect. Awesome. So that takes care of this one, right? And then we don't need this if statement. Cool. Nice. All right. What's the second part?
And what about black squares R minus 1 C?
That's checking which square?
That's checking the square to the left.
Perfect. Yep.
And then we can do and black square R C minus 1.
Cool.
And that'll check the one above it.
So what happens? So for example, this makes sure that both are black. Is that right? What is this actually doing? The second part.
It checks to see if the above and left squares. Wait, but it says above, left, or both. So maybe instead of and, we can say or.
Yep. Perfect. Cool. And nice. And if I get to, say I start off with 0, 0. Let's run through that case. What would 0, 0 return if I called something like this?
So it may return an error statement
Right.
because it can't check the rest of the conditionals.
Mm-hmm. So what would throw an error or an exception with this call? Which part?
Well, the second line of our return statement.
Mm.
Should we write an if statement to throw that out? To throw that 0, 0?
Yeah, we could. So basically, like 0 minus 1 would get us indexing into something that doesn't exist, right? So we would get exception would be?
No.
Okay, it'll probably be an array index out of bounds exception. It'll look like that, out of bounds. Cool. But what's a clever way, because I feel like this is super clean, what's a clever way of checking the left and top row? Because if it's on the left, right, you'll never have to check the left because there's nothing. Right. And if it's the top row, you'll never have to check above because there's nothing there. So how can we use that fact to make this a little easier for us?
We could either write an if statement, or we could add a conditional in this, checking to see if the row or the column is already equal to 0.
Okay.
Because
So,
if it is, then we can't really subtract from it.
Yeah. So let's say or. So how would you check if the row is equal to 0?
I think it's row, well, R equals.
Mm-hmm.
And then C equals.
Yep. C equals 0. And do you put an or in here or an and?
An or.
An or. All right, cool. I don't actually need so many lines. Something like that. Cool. I think this would work. Would you get, would this solve our array index out of bounds exception?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. All right. Anything else for this one, do you think? Any other pieces we're missing?
No, I think it does what it's supposed to do.
Okay, cool. Let's see. I think so too. Let's move on to part B. Oh, okay, so this is the space where you would write your answer.
Okay.
And then part B, okay. Part B is asking you to write the crossword constructor. So the constructor should initialize the crossword puzzle grid to have the same dimensions as the parameter black squares. Each element of the puzzle grid should be initialized with the reference to a square object with the appropriate color and number. The number is positive if the square is labeled and 0 if the square is not labeled.
So, are we basically doing like, we can name it like, I don't know, square 1 equals new square?
Okay, sure. Let me type this in, black squares. Okay, so square 1 equals mu square. Okay. What dimensions would you give it?
We need to give it the length.
The length? Okay.
Yeah, the length.
So
So
length
could-
of,
The length of black squares. So give black squares that length.
cool.
And ooh. Oh, could we do black square 0?
What would that do?
It checks if the square is not labeled. It says that we should give it the number is positive if the square is labeled, and 0 if the square is not labeled.
Right, so this would give it the length in the sense like the number of rows,
Yes.
and this would give it the number of columns, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So now we have a square 2D array. 2D array of squares. Cool. Awesome.
During the AP exam, do graders, do they favor writing comments in your code?
That's a good question. I don't think you're graded on your comments at all. I think it helps. I mean, it helps me. Helped me, I should say. And it might help your grader if your code is kind of confusing. But I would say ideally you won't need comments because your code kind of, as they say.
Okay.
So yeah, this is mostly just so that we're on the same page and like for quote educational purposes. But you don't need to do comments on your open response. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So we have a square. What do you call it?
Yes.
A square array. Yeah, 2D array.
Should we nested for loop?
Sure. So what are we iterating over?
We could do int r equals 0, so it'll go through the rows and columns.
Sure. What's your condition here?
We could just use the squares.length.
Okay.
Since that is the number of rows in this array. Yeah. And then we can have another for loop. But for int c equals 0, and this one would use c is less than black square 0 that length.
Cool. C++. Awesome. All right, so we're in our nested, we're in our nested for loop. Now, what do we want to check?
So I know we do need to use the to be labeled method that we just wrote.
Mhm.
Um, so should we have an if statement?
All right. What would that if statement check?
Um, it will check if black square at the position that our for loop is in.
Mhm.
It's gonna check to see if that's black. So you do black squares RC, and it'll return true if it's black,
Mhm.
false if it's not.
Mhm.
Um, if it's black, I think this is when we make our square object.
Make our square object. Okay, sure. So right now we have square1, which is a variable we defined that is a 2D array. So it has a bunch of nulls. So right, like for example, if this is our square1, it's a bunch of null values, right? So we need to actually set it to something other than null. How would we do that?
We could do square1
Mm-hmm.
RC equals new square.
Yeah. And the square constructor looks like,
It takes in a boolean and a number.
mhm.
The boolean would be true if it's going through this if statement.
Okay. So true. Oops. True.
The number.
Yeah, what is that num?
No.
The square has number num.
So
If it's black, does it have a number?
no. Well, yes. Is it 0? Can we use 0 here?
We can use 0. Let's look at this example. When does it when does it start the numbering? It starts at 1.
It does start at 0.
Yeah. So I think 0 is fine. Cool. So we say if it's black, it's no label, and true means it's black, right?
And then we could do else if
Mm-hmm.
call the to be labeled.
Else if else if
Can we call to be labeled in this conditional?
okay, yeah, we can do that. And what would we be calling it on? To be labeled takes
So it takes in 3 parameters.
Mhm.
We can just put RC and black squares.
Okay, yep, that makes sense.
And that will return whether or not the white, if the square is white,
Right.
then we need to well, make a square object in this position of the array.
Mm-hmm.
Just for one, RC equals equals u square false.
Because it's not black.
Right.
And
Ooh. We need a variable here that'll increase. Can we go back and new variable under where we created our square one?
for sure. What do you want it to be called? And what type?
It needs to be an integer, so I don't know, int count.
What was the word?
You just call it
Okay.
count.
Do you want to initialize it to something, or do you want to leave it as 0?
Let's let it be 1 because it starts counting the whites at 1.
Okay. Cool.
In the parameters of, yeah, we could do false count.
Cool.
And count would be the num that's taking in. Ooh.
Yep.
And then we could do count plus plus, so the next time it comes around, count would be different, and we won't have like repeats on that.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Then else.
Mm-hmm.
Justin. Well, do we need another one? Because it's either white or
True. I don't know. That's your call. Do you need another one? What if it's a white square that has a black one above it? You know what I mean?
White square has a black one above it?
It's not okay to be labeled, but it's white.
Oh. Then we could just do else and then do square one RC equals new square. We could do false 0 because then it would return false because it's white, and 0 so that's not counted.
Yeah. Exactly. Let me try to save some space here. That's it. Nice job. Anything else? Since this is a constructor, do you need to return anything?
No. It'll just,
yeah. The only comment I'd make is you've actually created a new variable here, whereas I'm pretty sure they give you this variable called puzzle.
Oh, okay.
So that's the only change I make. So I would change square one to say puzzle. Wherever we used it. So that way you're actually changing the variable in the class and not some random new variable.
Okay.
That's just something to keep an eye out for the exam. Other than that, this is like perfect. You would get full points. Nice job.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
Great.
All right, let's see if there's anything else. I think that's it for this one. And that's it. That's number 3. Nice job, Alyssa.
Okay.
Any questions on this one?
No, I think I got it now.
Okay, cool. So that was number 3. All right. So do you want to try more from the exam? We have around 20 minutes left. Or we can cover FRQ from the ebook or literally anything else. Your call.
Go on to maybe we can go through the or let's do question number 4 on this same exam.
Okay. All right, number 4. Okay. So this question involves the process of taking a list of words called word list and producing a formatted string of a specified length. The list word list contains at least 2 words consisting of letters only. When the formatted string is constructed, spaces are placed in the gaps between words so that as many spaces as possible are evenly distributed to each gap. The equal number of spaces inserted into each gap is referred to as the basic gap width. Any leftover spaces are inserted one at a time into the gaps from left to right until there are no more leftover spaces. The following 3 examples illustrate these concepts. In each example, the list of words is to be placed into a formatted string of length 20. Okay, so here we're given word list with 4 different words. We have the total number of the letters. They have that counted, so there's 14. The number of gaps is something we're given, and then the basic gap width is 2. So altogether, we should have 3 times 2 spaces. Leftover spaces is 0. So this is what the formatted string looks like. There are 3 gaps, 2, 3, 8, 9, 13, 14. And each one has a length of 2, or a basic gap width of 2, if we're using their terminology, and 0 left over. Cool. Let's see this example. We have 15 letters, 3 gaps, basic gap width of 1, and 2 leftover spaces. So here it says the leftover spaces are inserted one at a time between the words until there are no more. Do you see how that works in this example? The second one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it wants us to write some that will basically do this.
Yeah, I guess so. So it says here you will implement 3 static methods in a class named string formatter that is not shown. Okay, cool. So A, write the string formatter method total letters, which returns the total number of letters in the words in its parameter word list. For example, if the variable list string words is a frog is, then the call string formatter.total letters words returns 7, because there are 7 characters.
Okay. So
yeah, so let's do this.
we would first start a count variable. So I could do int count equals 0, or we use an int count.
Yep, okay. 1 second, let me just copy this over. String word list. All right, so int count, did you say?
Yes, we do int count.
Okay, int count, cool. Why does it do that? All right, next, what do we need?
We need a for loop that will go through each item in the array list word list.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do for int I equals 0, I is less than word list dot length, or is it dot size?
Which one is it?
I think it's dot size because it's in a array list.
Correct. And would it be dot size or dot size, like the method?
I think it's a method, so it's dot size with parentheses.
Perfect. Yep.
Then we do I plus plus.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Then
And mhm.
we could do word list, and then I in brackets.
In brackets, okay, like this.
Yes.
So how do you actually index into an array list? Keep in mind, word list is an array list of strings, right?
Yes.
So it looks something like, okay, their example was like a frog is, or something like that. You can't use the, what do you call it, the square brackets, because that's for an array.
Well, all right.
Count. We want to count each word's length, right? And add it together.
So maybe we could do inside of that, we could do count plus equals word list parentheses.
So because word list is an object, it's a list object, you'll have to use a method to access the items inside of it. So let's actually take a trip over Java API 8 list and see how to get to, or let's see, array list. So we have add all clear contains get returns the element at the specified position in this list.
So we could do word list dot
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So this would give us, for example, it would give us A, like it would give us the string A, but we don't
Can
want
we
the
add that link to that?
Yeah.
Would that be weird?
It would be a little weird, but it works because of object-oriented programming. So what you're doing here is you're getting the object, and then you're getting its length. And
Right.
is it length with or without parentheses? Is it a method?
I think it's a method, so we need parentheses.
Correct. And it's a method because string is an object, not a primitive type.
Right.
Cool.
So then outside of the for loop, we could return count.
Cool. Return count. So this returns the total number of letters in a list of strings. Cool.
Yes.
All right, part B. Write the string formatter method basic gap width, which returns the basic gap width as defined earlier. Okay. So it says, assume that total letters works as specified regardless of what you wrote in part A. You must use total letters appropriately to receive full credit. Complete method basic gap width below. So returns the basic gap width when word list is used to produce a formatted string of formatted len characters. There are some preconditions, and then they give you this header.
Okay. Maybe we should make a variable.
Okay.
We'll keep track of how many spaces we actually have left after the characters. So
Okay.
maybe do int equals 20.
Int spaces equals
Equals 20 minus word list dot total letters.
Okay. Did you say 20?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So what is 20?
It says. Actually, never mind.
I think you're on the right track, but what is 20? It'll be like
We need to format it.
yeah,
Length.
exactly.
I was thinking of the example where 20 was the format.
Yeah. I was like, 20, where's that coming from? Yeah, exactly. So it'll be the total length minus, what did you say?
Total letters of word list.
And is that it? Or this would give you the number of pieces you've added in, right?
Yes.
Cool. So we want to return the gap width, though.
Yes, so we need to divide it by we need to divide it by how many words there are in word list. So you could do word list dot size.
Okay, cool. Wordlist.size. Would it be wordlist.size or size minus 1?
I think it's word size minus 1
Okay, and why?
because we don't need a space after the last.
Yep.
I think that accounts for that.
Yep, exactly. Cool. All right. Part B done. Nice job. You are doing awesome. Okay, C. All right, here's the big question now. So C, write the string formatter method format, which returns the formatted string as defined earlier. The string formatter class also contains a method called leftover spaces, which has already been implemented. This method returns the number of leftover spaces as defined earlier and is shown below. Okay, so they have this thing that tells you the number of leftover spaces, right? Format, which actually does the work that the method explained at the beginning, or the question explained in the beginning.
Okay.
So you're given another static method format. You're given word list again, and you're given formatted line, so you know how long your final form should be.
Maybe we should start our string variable, since that's what needs to be returned in the end.
Okay.
So we could call it, I don't know, string F.
String F, okay.
Equals, you can leave it empty for now. So you just
Okay.
put the
Like that?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. That one. We need a variable that will hold on to our gap width,
Mm-hmm.
like how much space is in between gap, and then we need to count how many of those spaces are left over.
Okay.
Our gap width, I think this is when we can call our basic gap width method that we made earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll take in the parameters of word list length.
Mm-hmm.
Then leftover. Can we call the leftover method that would?
Yeah, because they give it to us and they tell us it works. So that is fair game. So leftover spaces, word.
And it'll take in the same parameters. Yeah.
Right. Cool. All right. Now what?
Now we need to add it. So maybe we need a
For loop, is that what you said?
yes.
Okay, cool.
That'll work.
And how do you want to do that? What are we iterating over?
We can do for int I equals 0. I is less than formatted length.
Less than formatted len. Okay.
Then
What
I
does
plus
what does formatted len tell us?
that tells us how long,
Okay.
like how long the string is that we need to return.
Okay. So would it be easier to iterate over the words you have and then move them into F, right? Or would it be easier to start with F and set each like character to something from word list? Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I don't. I don't think I know what you're saying.
Okay. So what we're trying to do is add things to formatted, or to add things to string F, right?
Right.
And we already know that the final length is going to be formatted len. So is that something we need to iterate over? Because what we really want to do is look at all the words in word list and like move them over and insert spaces when necessary. So
Instead of, okay, so we should use wordlist.size.
okay.
So that way we'll go through every item in word list. Is I plus plus, and then do F equals F plus word list dot get I.
Perfect. So this adds the word to F. Okay.
Yeah. And then we need to oh, I'm trying to think of whether or not there's an easier way to add the spaces without like making a for loop. Do we have to have a for loop here?
You tell me. So why would you want to add a for loop? And
So that we could, if we were to use a for loop, we could do for, I don't know, G, for int G equals 0, G is less than,
okay.
yeah, then G plus plus.
So G equals 0, G less than gap with G plus plus. Okay.
Then that we could add, so we do F equals F plus And then we can do a space in parentheses.
Perfect. Yep.
And then after it finishes going through that,
We've added our word, added our spaces. Now we need to check about these leftovers, right?
right. Do we need an if statement here?
Yeah. Okay.
If maybe we could check to see if there even are leftovers.
Cool.
So maybe if leftovers are greater than 0.
Yeah.
And I think we would add spaces like how we did in the for loop.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need another for loop. Yeah, we just copy that line.
Okay. And then we have one
And
less
then-
left over now because we added it.
Oh yeah, so we can do leftovers minus minus.
Mm-hmm.
And get like re-added.
Yep. All right. Anything else?
In the for loop, I don't think. I think we can return F.
Okay.
No.
I want to return F. Okay, so you're done.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Nice job. I think the only thing, and it's a tricky thing, is that here, so what you actually can't go all the way because the last word, right?
Yes.
In word list dot size, there will be an error because you don't want to add extra spaces on the end.
Okay.
So the only thing you'd like missed, I guess, or like you might get docked some points or like 1 point, is that you would want to iterate through size -1, so everything but the last one, and then right before you return, you would want to add the last one. So like word list dot get at word list dot size -1. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay.
So all this
I
is
see what you
doing, yeah, is just getting the last index and adding it to the very end.
Okay.
Yeah. Other than that, great job. I find like these are the trickiest questions or trickiest part of the AP exam, the FRQs.
Right.
But you nailed it. I can post, let's see. I will message you the answers. I'm sure you can find it online too. But yeah, really nice work. I'm gonna stop screen sharing. Cool. Anything else before we end today's webinar?
No, I think that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And feel free to email us if you want to do a one-on-one. We can totally do that. Yeah. All right. I'll see ya.
Perfect. And you said you will message me those.
Yes, I will. Yeah, I'll share this doc with you, and I will message you the answers, the PDF answers online.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.